Welcome back to United USA. We're going to be talking more about geoengineering, weather modification, spraying chems in the sky. Check it out. Listen up. Yo, ladies and gents, gotta share another one with you. This is from geoengineeringwatch.org, part 2. Gotta give a shout out to you. Man, you guys are doing great work out there. Keeping it real, not just for Americans, but for so many worldwide. 178 countries signed on with Agenda 21. I've been talking about this for years, talking about there's a lot of people coming out, finally sharing the information that they found. And if you check my video that I posted before this, it also shows U.S. patents that show aerial dispersal aircraft designed to disperse contaminants into the air. Check it out. I'll go ahead and post a link also in the description of that video as well. Check it out. Like, share, get this out there. Roll tape.
Toxicity in the environment.
These operations should be considered the most insane endeavor ever deployed by the human race. These operations are systematically derailing all of Earth's life support systems in the attempt to blot out the sun. The myopic, short-term objective of trying to cool the planet while worsening the overall warming. The climate engineers, if these operations are allowed to continue, are pounding the nails into our collective coffins.
From a scientific perspective, and what we know about nanomaterials and their effect on human health and the environment, this is a serious problem. And it really does warrant further scientific investigation.
We need the answers to get to the bottom of this national security problem.
If populations around the globe find out what has been done to them by their governments without their knowledge or their consent, there will be a shockwave around the globe that cannot be contained by the criminal governments that have now taken control of our planet and civilizations all over the world.
Just bringing transparency will shift so many things that it will make it extremely difficult, because you cannot manage an entire planet with overt force, only with covert force. If we bring transparency to who it is in the covert force, it shifts everything.
Look at your own health and you know what's going on. And if you love your children, join us in fighting what we need to fight. This is a just fight. It's the right fight. It's the right cause.
And if the climate engineering operations, which are derailing Earth's life support systems, are not immediately exposed and halted, all other challenges for the human race become moot, because the planet will no longer support life. We are in completely uncharted territory. Virtually the entire web of life is being systematically contaminated and decimated by the ongoing climate engineering operations, on top of all other forms of human activity or anthropogenic activity that are wreaking havoc in the web of life. Climate engineering, mathematically, statistically speaking, is the single greatest and most immediate threat we collectively face, short of nuclear cataclysm.
Sounds like pure science fiction, but there is a growing underground movement of people who believe that our harsh drought is part of a government conspiracy.
Here, outlandish ideas like weather warfare and climate engineering, in other words, weather control, are accepted as basic fact.
Climate engineering is the greatest single assault on the environment ever launched by humanity, without question.
Dane Wigginton, lead researcher for Geoengineering Watch, is sounding the alarm. Climate engineering, they say, is to blame for the harshest recorded drought in California history. Dane is used to skeptics. He once was one himself.
Talk is cheap for those that haven't investigated. I didn't want to believe this either.
His background is in solar power, but he started investigating on his own about a decade ago after becoming suspicious something was partially blocking the sun's energy from reaching his solar home.
I grew up in Southern California, choking in a sea of smog. None of the adults around me seemed concerned about the conditions, but for me, life in the toxic murk was intolerable. I have always fully recognized the immense damage being inflicted on the planet by countless forms of human activity. I lectured on anthropogenic global warming. I dreamt of clean air and blue skies. I dreamt of living in untainted wilderness off the grid. I dreamt of planting trees and watching them grow and thrive. I dreamt of coexisting with the wild inhabitants of the forest. I finally made it to the serene setting I had craved for so long, a remote forested mountaintop in Northern California. But the dream soon turned to a nightmare. When I began to lose significant amounts of my solar power uptake from my off-grid wilderness home, I knew something was radically wrong. We are officially told that the aircraft-emitted trails in our skies that linger, spread, and sometimes cover the entire horizon are just condensation. But the condensation trail narrative is perhaps the greatest lie ever perpetrated on populations all over the world. It is not possible for condensation to block at times 60, 70, even 80% of my solar power uptake. I began to research the issue of geoengineering, aka climate engineering, programs that governments around the globe and in climate science communities have told us are only proposals. Yet, there they were in the skies above me. Even today, we are being told, falsely, by the climate science community that we have one final card to play to try to avert total climate collapse, total planetary meltdown, but this is in fact a lie. Climate engineering, weather modification patents go back more than 100 years, but all available data indicates that programs were first deployed at scale immediately after World War II and deployed over the polar regions in the attempt to increase the size of the polar ice packs and thus try to regulate Earth's temperatures.
It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
Numerous government documents posted at geoengineeringwatch.org, some as much as 800 pages long, prove that global governments, even governments that the public perceives as being adversarial, are in fact colluding and cooperating on the climate engineering issue due to the cross-border ramifications. You can't climate engineer over your own country without affecting the entire planet. They are all working together on these issues, and other governments around the globe are either actively or passively cooperating.
Is the government experimenting with our weather? People say the government is up there in airplanes spraying all kinds of chemicals to change or manipulate the weather. It is called geoengineering, fighting global warming by putting a chemical dust in the atmosphere and reflecting harmful radiation back into space.
You could use barium oxide, for example, which makes big fluffy clouds. You could use tiny little bits of aluminum, which is benign in the environment, and essentially manage the climate.
There are 172 bills before the U.S. Senate right now calling for more weather modification programs.
A Weather Modification Act calling for research in, quote, attempting to change or control by artificial methods the natural development of atmospheric cloud forms.
My personal opinion is that we have to keep geoengineering on the table. We have to look at it very carefully because we might get desperate enough to want to use it.
There is a line of research on what's called geoengineering, which are various techniques that would delay the heating to buy us 20 or 30 years to get our act together.
And now Bill Gates is a part of this Agenda 21. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the truth. Please do your research. Please help and support me in this fight. Like, share, get it out there.